Welcome. What a great crowd. Give yourselves a hand. Thank you for coming out. And the weather not being the best. And let's give a hand to Steve Todd. Thank you very much, Steve, for sharing his talents with us tonight. My name's John Jordan. I am a member of the Wilmot Civic Action Network, which is a group that is a whopping maybe 2 months old about tomorrow, I think. And I'll tell you, this group has come together and really just all the stops have been let out. And I'd like to give a big round of applause for that group because of all the work that's been done over the last 2 months. It's just been phenomenal. And thank you. We also want to give a shout out to the Nith Valley Eco Boosters for sponsoring this evening tonight, and we very much appreciate their efforts and everything. And I'm going to invite Dorothy Wilson from the Nith Valley Eco Boosters to the front, who is going to give us the land acknowledgement.
Good evening. Before I do that, I'd just like to welcome you all here on behalf of Zion United Church. I need to speak closer. Okay. I just want to welcome all of you here tonight on behalf of Zion United Church. I'm actually a member of this church, and there are a few others here tonight that are members as well. And I'd also like to welcome you on behalf of the Nith Valley Eco Boosters. And downstairs, there's some information about our group and some handouts, so later in the evening when you're downstairs, have a look at that. You'd like to know where the bathrooms are, just in case. And there's one through this door to my right, it's on this level. Otherwise, if you go to the back, down the stairs to the right, you'll find a women's washroom, and down the stairs to the left, there's the men's washroom. And there's also one in the hallway that's just straight ahead of the side door, if any of you came in that way. So anyway, that's the housekeeping stuff. So now I'd like to give a land acknowledgement, and it's a bit crackly. Okay? So I'd like to begin our event this evening with a land acknowledgement, as it's important to both Zion United Church and the Nith Valley Eco Boosters that we continue down the path of reconciliation together. With that said, we acknowledge with gratitude that we have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral or Shonantan peoples, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississauga peoples. I want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and to Mother Earth. We should only take what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples among us, we are reminded of our important connection to this land community. In making this land acknowledgement, we recognize the cultural and historic harm inflicted by settlers on Indigenous peoples that has led to generational trauma and systemic injustices that continue to this day. We acknowledge that we have a responsibility to not only care for the land that Indigenous peoples have been looking after for thousands of years, but also to work towards improved relationships. It is especially important this evening that we acknowledge our responsibility to care for the land that has been stewarded by Indigenous peoples and more recently by settlers. In fact, the reason we are here is to advocate for the ongoing stewardship of the 770 acres so that land can continue to be the productive farmland and home to precious natural spaces that it is today. Thank you.
Now that's a land acknowledgement made right for us. Thank you, Dorothy, for that. We've got a pretty full we've got a pretty full agenda for you tonight, and we hope you're going to leave here tonight with information you didn't know, but there's probably going to be a lot of things that there's still going to need to be answers to questions, and that's where we do need people's help. If you want to reach out, be part of the Wilmot Civic Action Network. I don't know if I'm touching something here or what's going on. Stand back a bit, Neil. Okay. And you know, your help and your lending hand, no matter what it is, if you can help out, we'd really appreciate it, and certainly reach out to us regarding that. The first thing we're going to show, as most of you probably know, we've completed 2 episodes of our mini 3-part documentary series regarding the Wilmot land grab. It's been filmed and produced by a fellow by the name of Tom Very, a very sound, incredibly talented fellow, the way he puts things together like this, and he's just very passionate about what's going on here, and he's just finding out so much for himself. When he was putting the second episode together, he says, well, that's pretty wild about what happened in Elmira, huh? And he had no idea, you know, and now he knows what happened in Elmira with the water there and everything as well. So Steve, if we're going to be queued up, we're going to show you, it's about 2 minutes and 40 seconds, so it's not going to, can we get some house?
How did developers here know months before any of the public, with such certainty that they were willing to bet?
Can we get some house lights down a bit, and that's grand. That should be good. Okay, episode number 1, folks.
How did developers here know months before any of the public, with such certainty that they were willing to bet tens of millions of their own dollars to try to lock down these lands, some of the most protected farmland in all of Canada?
We know that they have been lying to our faces. We have evidence of that lying, and we have a huge lack of transparency. It is really injuring these local agricultural businesses.
Farming is not a decision that you make the day off. You have to plan ahead. So right now, we would love to start planning for next year, but
Is there 2 screens open on the YouTube, or we're just not able to play? Okay, a few not, but okay, I don't know if that's something we can work on in the meantime. I don't know if Neil, you can cue something else up there. What we can do in the meantime, if we can hit the house lights or bring the house lights back up again, unless Neil's going to get us something going. Okay. On with the agenda. We'll get back to that, and hopefully we'll get that fixed soon. Our first guest speaker tonight is Susanna Compton. Susanna was born and raised, if everybody knows where the cabbage farm is, at the corner of Bleems and Nafziger. And her and Richard and Cheryl Good, their parents, are here tonight. Susanna is a local writer, very passionate about farming and farmland, and certainly the injustices that are going on currently with what's happening here. I've seen Susanna delegate a couple times at Regional Council, and she packs a punch. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Susanna Compton.
Thanks, John. Are we gonna? I might pack a punch, but I'm short.
Let's kind of swing this around like that, maybe. Oh, there you go, that one.
Next time I'll bring a ball. This is awesome. You guys are all here. Thank you for showing up. We had a snowstorm and you still showed up. Way to go. This is community right here. Knowing where my food comes from is important to me. Teaching my children how food gets from seed to field to my table is something that I consider a vital life skill. There are over 1,400 farms in Waterloo Region. The Ontario Federation of Agriculture tells us that the vast majority of these farms are family-run, somewhere around 98% of them. I'm sure your neighbors could tell you that too. Farmers are our friends and neighbors and the people we run into at the grocery store and the people we go to church with. Waterloo Region's diversity of industry is our strength. We have a solid auto and manufacturing sector. We have Canada's Silicon Valley. We have a great post-secondary education system. And we also have a thriving food and drink industry because of our strong agricultural system. Each sector is valuable and integral to our society and to our community. And that's why this land assembly on good farmland is such a significant threat to our community. If this expropriation goes through, it will destabilize the agricultural industry in all of Waterloo Region. Are we prepared to destabilize 1,400 family businesses? What about the food and drink sector that relies on farm to table? That's billions of dollars of our local economy. I know farmers who are ready to expand their businesses. They are bursting at the seams. They need to hire more employees and expand their facilities, but they don't feel that they can because they're so close to the land assembly. They don't believe that they'll be able to continue farming. They think that they'll be next. This is a shadow or land in waiting. It's farmland that could thrive, but it can't be invested in because there's no future for it. Shadows occur in the farmland around urban centers. The shadow around the land assembly will be huge. We can already see it beginning. It will not only extend to the neighboring farms in every direction, the shadow will exist from the land assembly to Kitchener-Waterloo because the roads and infrastructure will need to be expanded, and development between New Hamburg, Baden, and Kitchener will be in constant speculation. Waterloo Region has not had shadowland before because of the countryside line. This is new to us. The countryside line has been Waterloo Region's green belt. It's been part of our regional planning for decades. It is a hard line that says development may go this far and no further. On the protected side of the countryside line, farmers are investing in their businesses. Barns, tile drains, buildings are regularly being built, and expanded investment is made in these thriving farming businesses because these farmers understand that their land will be farmed in 5, 10, even 20 years. Farming is a business. A business can't invest and grow when its future is unknown. We're seeing that in a very real way right now with the tariff threats. This land assembly cuts into the heart of that. The farmland was protected by provincial and municipal law. The region and the province crossed the countryside line without any warning, consultation, input from the public, or input from the agricultural system, who is most greatly affected by this change. The shadow land created by the land assembly will likely extend well beyond the land assembly and adjacent areas. The countryside line has been crossed with this land assembly with no warning. What will stop the region from doing it again? What will stop the province from doing it again? Who will be next? That is how you destabilize the entire agricultural system in Waterloo Region. Every one of those 1,400 farms are watching what happens with this land assembly because it will affect how they continue to farm. The rest of Ontario is also watching. Their farms are affected by this too. We need to reestablish the laws that have been protecting this farmland. We need a green belt that covers our prime farmland so that we can feed ourselves and so that the farmland will be there to feed our children as well. Food scarcity is a huge problem right now, and we're only aggravating it with this threat to our farmland. We're not against jobs, and we must stop this false dichotomy of either jobs or farmland. They are not mutually exclusive. We can, yes. We can create jobs. We can even have a mega industrial site in Waterloo Region without destroying the farmland that has been prioritized to be preserved. It takes planning and it takes investment. This land assembly shows a wild desperation. It was not well thought through. It was not the result of careful planning. We can't let our leadership throw around wild desperation when we need order and planning and care in how we build up our community for the future. Only 5% of Ontario is farmland. Only 2% of Ontario's land is prime farmland, which means the highest quality growing soil, the places where we can grow things like fruits and vegetables and beautiful carrots and cabbages. All of the farmland in Waterloo Region is considered prime. It's a finite resource and it's worth fighting for. Thank you. So John mentioned I've delegated at Regional Council a few times and at Wilmot Township as well, and we're looking for more people who are interested in delegating in support of the fight for farmland. So if you're interested in that, come and talk to me or find Kevin. Thanks.
Thank you, Susanna. That was grand. I'm just going to move this back up a bit if I can. Okay, we're all right then. A couple housekeeping rules. Let's just make sure our phones are on off or on airplane mode. And for all the ladies here in the yellow shirts, I'm not the one you need to yell at. We like these ladies. They go to the regional council meetings all the time, and they're our cheerleaders for Fight for Farmland. And they were certainly... And also at the plowing match when we had a good presence there as well too. So we thank you for your activism and your help and your chutzpah. We very much appreciate that. Sorry. Oh, have we? This is the second video. I think that. Yeah, that. Oh, now it says part 1. Okay, we're going to try it. Let's try it.
How did developers here know months before any of the public with such certainty that they were willing to bet tens of millions of their own dollars to try to lock down these lands, some of the most protected farmland in all of Canada?
We know that they have been lying to our faces. We have evidence of that lying, and we have a huge lack of transparency. It is really injuring these local agricultural businesses.
Farming is not a decision that you make the day off. You have to plan ahead. So right now, we would love to start planning for next year, but we can't.
We are supporting the region of Waterloo with funding to help purchase the land.
The province has, put these parameters of engagement around a lack of transparency, around NDAs, and is ultimately funding the entire scheme. The chair of the region, Karen Redmond, says the expropriation was an obligation in the partnership agreement they signed with the province. You did not indicate that you are supportive of expropriation.
Look at what we did at Volkswagen.
It's just say no.
But
You've got to accept this absurdly low price within the next 10 days or face expropriation. No one should have their home, their farm, their business, their livelihood taken away from them on 10 days' notice with a threat like that. More troubling yet, when they picked up the phone to call their elected officials, they were told, sorry, we can't talk to you, we're under a non-disclosure agreement. The people you elected can't speak to you because they're under an NDA is not the way our democracy works, is unprecedented, and certainly didn't go over well in the community here.
It honestly was like a nightmare. All the secrecy, all of the lack of information. You don't know, are they coming for my farm next?
I don't know why all the secret was going on either. I couldn't figure it out.
When the premier's asking about, all the secrecy, maybe he should look into the mirror and ask why all these non-disclosure agreements are being utilized. They've tied the hands of regional councillors and staff, so none of us know what's going on. Even an MPP, I don't know what this land is being assembled for.
They're basically threatening to take my life away from me, and I would like to know what kind of crime have I committed that they can do that to me. Our farm's not for sale, and I know I am not a willing host no matter what happens. They're going to have to drag me off the farm.
And the Oscar goes to Stuart Snyder on that one. Want to turn the house lights back up again, Andy? Sorry? Oh, we're going to do that one now again? Great. Okay.
The quality of farmland and the quality of soil and the climate conditions, the weather conditions, are such that only 0.5% of our total land mass is prime farmland. And guess what? More than 50% of that 0.5% is in southern Ontario, between Ottawa and Windsor. We're losing 319 acres of that every day in Ontario.
There's lots of farmland across Canada. but you can generally just grow grains or livestock feed. In Class 1 farmland, that's where you get all of your vegetables and your fruits and your produce. So it's rare, and it's one of the few ways that we can actually feed ourselves with a diverse diet.
We're not just losing farms, we're literally stabbing a stake in the heart of the most productive farmland in the country. We're taking out the best land.
So a developer shows up, offers you a deal, you don't take it, and then the government comes along. If you don't take the deal, we're going to expropriate it. That could happen anywhere in Ontario, just like it's happening in Wilmot. Is that the Ontario that you support, Minister of Agriculture?
This is a turning point, really, for agriculture in Ontario. If you can be so disrespectful to these farmers in Wilmot, then clearly you'll do this to other farmers.
Just like we've had a gun held to our head, really, we have had no choice in the matter.
This isn't just 770 acres. This development will impact negatively farms for kilometers in every direction. It will compromise the highest producing farms in the country.
We don't know what they are planning. It could be a landfill. It could be a chemical plant. It could be anything. So if water gets contaminated, our business could be in danger.
We just have to look at Elmira that polluted the water ecosystem, and guess what? They're not being able to pull water from their wells anymore, and they're coming from Wilmot now. If that happened with our water system here, there's no plan B.
When you pave over that soil, it's gone forever. We'll lose it for some unspecified industrial development. When we're losing 319 acres of farmland each and every day in Ontario is completely unsustainable. The Premier would say things like, oh, well, we'll just move the farms further north. Well, sorry, Doug, there's this thing called the Canadian Shield. You're not going to grow field crops on rock.
It takes anywhere from 500 to 2,000 years to create one single inch of good quality topsoil. And I'm going to tell you, you cannot grow carrots in 1 inch of topsoil. We're going to run out of land that can feed us if we keep going the way we're going. This soil is worth protecting. The space where this soil exists has to be protected. Food sovereignty is sovereignty. If we can't feed ourselves, how long are we going to stay a sovereign nation?
So we shot that towards the end of October. Jen, I don't know what kind of crystal ball you had at that time to talk the way you did, because now what's happening south of the border, boy, oh boy, do we need to ever grow our own food even more and more, hearing that. And, you know, we saw Doug Ford. I happened to be thinking well enough to get my phone out and film him at the plowing match when he said, "You got me." You know, I don't know what about all the secrecy, and why didn't I have the wherewithal to say, what about the NDAs you had them sign? Like, that's, but anyway, hindsight being 20/20 with that too. So, yeah, so there's one more coming out yet, and the main thrust behind that will be the infrastructure or lack of infrastructure, and our water is what it's going to be addressing on that. So next, Mr. Palmatier, we're going to bring Steve Palmatier up. And Steve is going to go through the results of the polling we had completed about 2 weeks ago. Thank you, Mr. Palmatier, one of our other core members and my partner in crime. You probably heard us on the radio even, CBC, 570, everything that way too. So we've been out there doing the dog and pony show. So without further ado, Mr. Steve Palmatier.
Hello, everyone. Raise your hand if you got a call with some questions asking about your feelings toward this land assembly. Anybody in here? A couple of faces, a couple of hands. These are the results of that poll that we commissioned with Palace Data, a firm out of, I believe it was the GTA. I won't get in, I'm not a statistician, and I'm not going to get into confidence of or reproducibility, et cetera, but I think given the feelings that you all have to be here on such a snowy night, and given the feelings that are produced by that wonderful documentary that John has produced, we wanted to see whether those feelings were measurable in the community by calling people and asking them a series of questions. What would the quantifiable data show us? And this was the first strong indication that something was, there was a growing feeling here in the community. The bar graph in front of us is pretty, I mean, anyone with two eyes. Everybody got two eyes, one eye, three eyes, whatever. You can see there's a great big blue section. Not at all likely. Strong ratio, 3-to-1 approximately. Will not vote or are less likely to vote for a councillor who supports the expropriation in the next municipal, we're talking about municipal elections here. And only a mere, look at that dark green little sliver there on the right, 5%, 1 in 20, said that they would likely vote for a candidate who supports the proposed expropriation. Can you go to the next slide there, Neil? Again, this one pretty much speaks for itself, right? Big blue section, no, 58%. Over on the left, a couple question marks there, pretty small little sliver. 12% of respondents to our poll felt that the citizens of this riding, or rather of this municipality, I should say, were adequately consulted. Approximately 1 in 10 people were, okay, I've been consulted. No, we're going to keep moving along. Thank you, Anna. Sure, we could do a poll right here. Anybody, put your hand up if you feel that there was adequate consultation from your elected representatives. No. So the point, without getting into the questions, the reason I'm not going to read the questions that we asked, Anne, is it's more important for us to understand the results. What did we see in the responses to those questions? And some of the questions were longer than others, and I don't want to get into that. Rather, let's just look at the bar graphs in front of us and see what they say. So go ahead, Neil, to the next slide. A strong majority of nearly 6 out of 10 respondents in the Kitchener-Conestoga riding, now we're talking about the entire riding, think elected officials should be allowed to participate in public debate. Seems like a no-brainer. But we're talking about 20% some would agree, 41% strongly agree. 6 in 10, a majority, believe that, if you elect someone, they should be able to debate it in public. And not be bound by a non-disclosure agreement. It's absurd that I even have to say such a thing. Go ahead, Neil, to the next one. This one's a little bit more complicated because we've broken it out by the municipality, Wilmot, as well as the riding. So we actually polled people in Kitchener-Waterloo, what is described here as an urban respondents versus rural, say, in Wilmot. Now, across the entire riding, 67%, 2/3 of voters said they would definitely not vote for, or might not vote for a candidate who supports this expropriation in a provincial election. We're talking about provincial now, compared to a mere 14% that said they might vote or definitely will vote for a candidate who supports the expropriation. This is obviously apparent in that top bar. When you combine urban and rural, we're talking about a very small sliver of people who would vote in favor of a candidate who supports all of this. That figure jumps to a staggering 83% if we look just in the Wilmot Township, presumably because everyone lives nearby and drives by the site every day and understands it intimately. Go ahead to the next slide, Neil. Yeah, that's okay. I think it's pretty apparent what I'm getting at here. There we go, almost. What we saw in our polling results confirmed what many of us already knew. And the feeling that would get us off the couch and into a church on a snowy night like this is reflected in this data. So I'll continue. We broke this out by voting intention. We broke the data out by voting intention. Who do you intend to vote for, and what is your feelings toward this expropriation? Things get pretty bleak for our incumbent, Mike Harris Jr., when you look at his own party, the Progressive Conservative Party. 57% of voters who identify as progressive conservatives said they definitely would not or might not vote for a provincial candidate who supports this proposed expropriation. Now compare that number, 57, to just 21% of progressive conservatives. They love the jobs, they love the economy, those progressive conservatives, don't they? And yet only 21% think the government should interfere and take private property away from these farmers and would vote accordingly. Think about that. Go ahead to the next slide. Looking just at Wilmot Township, 66, 2/3 of the residents that we polled said they don't even trust the incumbent, Mike Harris Jr., to represent their interests. Only 22%, about 1 in 5 people that we polled, stated they somewhat trust or strongly trust Mike Harris Jr. to represent their interests. Is anyone surprised by this? Did we really have to pay to ask this question? Go ahead. Go ahead, Neil. All right, here we go. Again, breaking this out by voting intention. I apologize for discussing voting intentions and partisan politics. Thank you so much to the Eco Boosters for letting us into your sanctuary to talk about this. I don't want this to be about red versus blue or left versus right or voting intentions, but I do want to present you all this data because it is important and it reflects what's going on, the feeling in our community. So thank you, Dorothy. Astoundingly, 38% of conservatives, self-identifying progressive conservatives in the riding, it's a big, big riding, stated they don't trust their own conservative MPP, the incumbent, Mike Harris Jr., to represent their interests of Wilmot residents. Now you go to, say, the NDP, and that number jumps to 86%, an astounding majority of NDP supporters. 89% of those who identify as liberals express concerns about their trust in the incumbent. Go ahead, Neil. I think that's covered that. What's next on the agenda here tonight, John? Mr. Balkwill, our moderator. Let me introduce to you someone that I have holding great esteem, Mr. Mike Balkwill from the Small Change Fund. Let him hear it.
Thanks, Stephen. I work with a Small Change Fund. That you do, and I joined with this Wilmot Civic Action Group a couple of months ago. We've been working hard together, and one of the reasons we're doing that is your fight is everybody's fight. As Susanna said, as people say in the videos, if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. It's important to stop it here. It's important to work together. All eyes are on Wilmot. What you're doing is very important. It's very important you be supported by others. We are here to be with you. You are not alone. You've received a lot of information tonight. We saw 2 videos. We saw some polling data. I think that it's important for a moment to say as well what the Wilmot Civic Action wants. It wants to protect farmland. It wants to stop the expropriation. And it wants permanent protection by expanding and extending the Greenbelt. Do you agree with that? Do you like those demands? Do you agree with your leadership? Now you've received a lot of information and we want to give you a chance to do 2 things, to talk to each other in reaction to that, because this is a community experience, and you might not be sitting next to somebody you know, or behind you might be somebody you haven't talked with this about. So we want to give you a chance to do two things. To share with each other your reaction to what you saw in the videos and to the polling results that Stephen presented, to share your reaction to that, and also, do you have any questions? Because we want to answer your questions. So I'm going to ask you to do this, which, if you've been in the church before, I think you know how to do this, is turn to people next to you, behind you, in front of you, and say how you feel about what you saw in the videos. How are you feeling about the issue? What is your reaction to the polling results? And then we're going to ask you, we're going to get some highlights from you, and Joan, I think, or somebody is going to wander around with a microphone to gather any questions you have, and we're going to answer them. Are you ready for that? Yes? Clapping? Yes? Sign of you ready for that? All right, so I'm going to time you. We're going to take about 10 minutes. Turn to people who are next to you, in front of you, behind you, and give each other a chance to talk, okay? Be sure everybody gets a chance.
Do you work for several different like causes? Like, okay. Because remember you mentioned about a gravel pit in Milton or something like that, right? Good for you. It's good to be facilitating it, right?
Yeah. Hi, Terry, right?
I'll just.
I get it all off. This is my gravel mining tool. This is called This is the 2-minute warning.
Test. Yeah, now you go.
Okay, can I draw you out of your conversation? Okay, so we're interested to hear comments, and we're also interested to hear questions. And Anne here has the microphone, and she's going to wander around and come up to you so that everybody can hear you. You may stand up and belt it out. That might work. The acoustics in here are pretty good. Hands up if you have a question. Anybody have a question? Back there's a question. Okay, Anne's making her way to you. We're not hearing it though, Anne. Nope.
Just speak into it. Oh, okay. Okay, my question is about if there is any information about the legal proceedings that have been proposed about lawsuit against the government to, to end the land assembly or, yeah, I know that there was talk of that.
So what we've done, where do you live, first of all?
Kitchener Center.
Oh, you're, okay. We have gone around to the neighbors of the 770, we've called it, within a certain radius. And it's a bit of a process because, well, we got to get everybody. I don't know everybody. Like Tom Malloy thinks I do, but I don't. So there's a number of people I don't know who they are or anything else. Sometimes I'm going to have to go up and knock on a door to find out who they are, and then we're going to get permission. So we had a lawyer out the end of last September, who's well-versed. He's an expropriation lawyer. And so we're going to gather all the neighbors' names and everything, and with their permission, we're going to be sending a letter to the region to put the region on notice to say that if this goes through, there's going to be claims. basically is what it is. So they know that that's going to be happening. And it's something called injurious affection. Pretty good, huh? And so that, effects of what's happening, how that's going to affect your life on your property, and everything that way. So does that answer your question? Well, I'm no lawyer, but well, it's within the laws. Like, it's in the expropriation law that if you are affected by an expropriation, then there are claims that are valid that, dust and noise and all the different kind of stuff can be claimed upon. Okay? Well, if it goes through, which it's not, but if it goes through, there will be claims, and that's about all you can do then at that point. That's right. No, that's not a before, but it's letting the region know that if it was to go through, then there will be claims. Right. Kevin Thomas and everybody.
Yeah, and if I can just mention from the... And if I can just mention, too, from the Fight from Farmland perspective, we spent a lot of time talking to a bunch of lawyers, both locally as well as in Toronto, and there are issues under the Planning Act and with Section 24(1) of the Planning Act where the region is not allowed to make expenditures on anything that isn't in the regional official plan. This mega assembly site is not in the official plan, and we've had planners calling us right from day one saying, look, the region is not in conformity with the law, and we've actually had planners pursuing things from the planning side of things through the ministry, through the courts and everything. And so we have a bunch of potential avenues that we could be pursuing that way. The big issue with that is it's going to take funding. And so one of the things we need to look at that we have not done to date is much fundraising. But we do have legal firms in Toronto who are on deck and are ready to start pursuing those avenues as soon as we provide a retainer. So that's something you'll hear more about later. But there are a bunch of other legal avenues as well. So.
Spoiler alert, there'll be requests for donations later in the meeting. Are there other questions? Yes, right here. Anne?
Goes through the expropriation, but the whole industrial thing doesn't work, they'll give it back. How would that possibly work? The people would have moved away.
That sounds a bit like a rhetorical question. Are there any rhetoricians in the room? That's the big question. How do you give it back? The important thing is to stop it. There was another hand behind you, I think, right there.
Hey there. I've been talking to a lawyer myself, and I asked her about class actions. I told her what was going on out here, and I talked about class actions. She agreed to get lawyers who have no connection to Wilmot. But what she said is the more topics that you can put in the class action, if one of them doesn't go through, that the other one might. And I've made it very clear I'm concerned about the water. Karen Redmond wants to double the population, which means the water here goes half as far. Like, it doesn't take a genius to use, you don't even need a calculator to figure that one out. So is there likely to be harm caused by the actions of the region, and can that be turned into more of a cease and desist as compared to going in after the fact?
So this sounds like advice more than a question, which is fine. That's a good advice. And I think there's a theme here about lawyers and legal challenges. And I think what you're hearing is two things. One, there's been some initial exploration. There are some lawyers on deck. Also, it's generally speaking not a good strategy, a good thing to speak publicly about your legal strategy. But it sounds like, I'm just going to make a straw vote. How many people think a legal challenge to try and stop the expropriation is a good idea? So that's assigned to the leadership. There was a hand back there, I think, about a question, or, yeah.
I'm coming.
Please stand up.
I just wonder how Bill 23 fits into all this. And also, there's a Wilmot official plan as well that, if you look in that, it promotes like agriculture in the township. And I can't find anything in that official plan that supports this at all. So I don't know how that all fits.
Well, I'm lucky. The Grand River Environmental Network has worked on our official plans for about the past 20 years, trying to get our 2009 visionary regional official plan through that had the concepts for environmentally sensitive landscapes, our protected countryside, our countryside line, as well as our LRT that has transformed our urban areas and downtown cores. And then the more recent update to that plan, which was just passed in August of 2022, so less than 2 years ago or 2 and a bit years ago. Those are 30-year plans that indeed look far into the future. And it was interesting. There was 4 years of planning that went into that official plan update. I think there was 105 public meetings. There were thousands of people submit, and not just people, but businesses and groups and organizations, submissions into it. This mega assembly was treated the same way as a new convention center. Has anyone heard much of the new convention center here in Waterloo Region? No. There's one sentence in the regional official plan about a new convention center. It says, if we ever need a convention center, we'll plan for it at the time. And that was exactly the same thing with this mega industrial site. No one ever felt that we needed a mega industrial site. It never came up in any of the meetings. There was a total of one sentence that was put in the regional official plan. It says, if we ever need a mega industrial site, we'll plan for it in the future. And it only says plan for it in the future. It does not say develop, purchase, build, acquire. So even then, within the scope of what's in the regional official plan, they can only plan for it. They can't actually proceed without doing an OPA or an official plan amendment and that. So you're right, this is not incongruent or alignment with either the regional official plan, the Wilmot official plan, any of the master plans, the sewage master plans, the master transportation plans. It just shows how out of sync this is. And planning's important. All this stuff all has to integrate and work together. When you build a new home in Breslau, in Woolwich Township, it has to get water from Kitchener that comes through Waterloo and pumping stations all along the way, under the roads, under the LRT track. There is so much coordination that has to happen that gets thrown out of whack when you just suddenly drop a new mega industrial site, one of the largest potential industrial developments in the entire world, way out in the middle of nowhere, a 50-kilometer round trip from the major centers of Kitchener, Cambridge, or Waterloo, where these things were always envisioned. So, excellent question. That's why we have these plans to have a coordinated future. And frankly, the reason Waterloo is where we are today and have things like LRTs and countryside lines is simply we've done that planning better than most others. Yes, and that is, we shouldn't underestimate the way the Ford government has worked against the greater public good here in the province. Because not only have we seen a lot of, I'll call it unplanned things that never were anticipated, like this mega industrial site, like the destruction of Ontario Place, like the Science Centre magically folding overnight and that, but we've also seen things like the forest boundary expansions, where in our regional official plan, when we had a focus on farmland preservation, growing up and not out, and sustainable, complete, walkable communities that only had 150 acres of farmland loss because we already have so much land designated for development in the future. We then saw the Ford government come afterwards, even though we had 2,000 pages in August of 2022 of studies and expert opinion backing up our plan, just like Hamilton. Hamilton had 0 acres of boundary expansion, and the Ford government came along and instead forced open 6,400 acres of forced urban boundary expansion. That's dozens and dozens and dozens of farms that are totally unnecessary, that we don't need, that's driving our farmers and Mennonites off the land for expensive sprawl that we can't afford. And it's not just those sort of things. We're seeing all kinds of other things that have been happening that are unplanned as well. So it just adds to that planning chaos and takes away from that long-term planning certainty we need.
We have one more, we take one more question. Yes, go ahead and clap for Kevin.
Just quickly,
Do we have any idea of how things have shifted or how much worse this might look now that the region is no longer responsible for planning in Wilmot?
Yeah, and that's a whole other issue here, and that is the success of our regional official plans has not always pleased a lot of land speculators and developers. In 2009, we saw a consortium of 26 different developers appeal every single word of our 2009 official plan. And they fought in court for 6 years over it. Thank goodness our region was willing to defend its visionary thinking, or we wouldn't have our core renewals, we wouldn't have our countryside line or our LRTs. It took until 2015 for them to finally settle that plan. But those developers and land speculators vowed that they would not be lost again. And Kathleen Wynne, when she was premier, made it against the law to appeal regional official plans in their entirety, which was as soon as Ford got into power, he removed that. But the developers went so even further, and they have removed planning authority from the region of Waterloo. So the region of Waterloo no longer has an official plan. As of January 1st, just 2 months ago, our regional official plan was struck down and deleted. It wasn't just us. There were 7 other regions, upper tier regions, Halton, Peel, Durham, York, Waterloo, all lost our plans. And it's unfortunate because Ford saw the 2-tier levels of government as red tape that needed to be removed. He said, "Why? So it's redundant red tape, let's get rid of it." What he didn't realize is that while in some places multiple layers may be an inhibitor, the region here is actually a facilitator. Because of the complexity of our water, because of the complexity of our sewage, trying to get 7 different municipalities to work together required that coordinated regional plan. And it is very troubling to look into the future to think that our visionary plan that should have been the model for the country instead now is being destroyed and taken away.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for your conversation. Thank you for your questions. And John, I think you're going to come up and introduce another speaker.
Moving right along, we have a second guest speaker for you tonight. John Drummond, Greenbelt Farm, just north of Mitchell, if anybody's ever visited John's farm before. The guy is a wealth of information when it comes to farming. But I'll never forget the one day we were out there. This is quite a few years ago. His boys were only, I think they were about 10 or 12 years old. And they were working in the nursery. And a friend of ours who is very much a gardener, and he's a British fella, and he had came to our place after he was at John's place. And John's kids knew every plant by its Latin name. And so Chris comes to our place. He says, "Yeah, I was there, this little fella, I couldn't have been any more than 12. And he knew every Latin name of every plant there was. I couldn't believe it, you know." And it's just only a Greenbelt farmer you're going to get that. And so John is very passionate about farming. John, very, very astute when it comes to that. So I'm just going to bring John up, and he's going to give you a little presentation on his view of what's going on here and farming in general, I think. So let's welcome John Drummond.
Thank you very much. I hope this microphone and I get along well.
Let's do a little. Get this over here for you, John.
Okay, does that sound okay? Okay, thank you very much. Canada is a vast country. A landmass of 8.3 million square miles. For context, there's 640 acres per square mile. So that's a pretty big ranch. And that may also be partly why the general public is not as concerned about the Wilmot situation as it should be. But when you take into account that less than 0.5% of that huge landmass is Class 1 agricultural land, then things come into a sharper focus. Across the country, that's only 12 million acres. Half of that is right in southern Ontario. And that's also where about 40% of the country's population is. It's very clear that the potential for land use conflicts is going to get us. That's why we're losing 300 acres a day across the province. It's been said that a land that's good for agriculture is good for everything else. Level topography, easy digging, natural drainage, and so on. And it's true. And again, that land is vied for by many different people for different uses. Alternative uses such as houses, roads, industry, they can be put onto lesser lands without too much difficulty. There are many cities in Europe that are built into mountainsides. Roads just about anywhere. Houses and factories can be put almost anywhere as long as fragile ecosystems aren't ruined. There's old pits and quarries of 800-acre size in this province that possibly could be used for industrial purposes as long as water table issues were resolved. Nation building is not about bringing everything into one municipality. So sometimes premiers or even municipal councillors sort of vie for the big sexy factory or something that's very topical. And nation building should say, where does it make sense for the country? Growing food, though, is a little more site-specific. It's impossible to take 100 acres of Wilmot land and exchange that for 100 acres in Sudbury or New Liskeard and expect anything in terms of the same yields, the same efficiencies, or the same viability. The highest and best use for this land is food production. And at a time when 1 in 8 households in this region rely on food support, it's absolutely unconscionable to permit the destruction of 770 acres of land. Another misconception about agriculture is that it's sort of a small potato sort of thing. There's still this image of old MacDonald's farm that persists. And it's true, many farms are small farms with 1 or 2 people managing them. But collectively, it's much different. There's 871,000 people in the province that are in the agri-food sector. That's way more than the auto sector. 1 in 9 people. Over in my home county of Perth, we're known for the festival theatre around the world. Yet, agriculture brings in more revenue than festival, theatre, and tourism industry combined, 4 times. We don't hear much about it on the news, but that's just the way it is. Now, suddenly with dramatic policy changes in the US, Canadians are scrambling for ways to diversify the economy. People are worried about escalating grocery prices, other cost of living factors, and somehow trying to build resilience into our economy, into our society. Agriculture is crucial to all these things. Aesop's fable about the goose that laid the golden eggs comes to mind here. But Douglas Ford's call for a snap election, saying he needs a stronger mandate to protect the people of Ontario, is completely disingenuous. With a strong majority already, he's failed to protect the 8,000 homeless people in the province and the 2.5 million people without a family healthcare provider. He's also failed to even follow his own government's planning statement from last August, which expounds on the need to protect farmland. I'm going to quote one paragraph directly from that planning statement. Planning authorities are required to use an agricultural system approach based on provincial guidance to maintain and enhance a geographically continuous agricultural land base and support and foster the long-term economic prosperity and productive capacity of the agri-food network. As part of the agricultural land base, prime agricultural areas, including specialty crop areas, shall be designated and protected for long-term use for agriculture. It's quite a run-on sentence, but it's there. Mr. Ford appears to be bent on gaining a longer leash just to borrow billions so he can spread it around his pet projects of highways, tunnels, and a spa. In lockstep, the region is also entirely disregarding the provincial planning statement concerning agricultural lands. Now, up on the world stage, the big dogs are chasing imperial dreams. Putin's invasion of Ukraine, Trump buying up Canada, Greenland, and now Gaza. But the smaller dogs look at what the big ones get away with and start wondering what they could grab too. Here in Ontario, Mr. Ford displays a dismissive intransigence, not backing away from this dangerous power play, hiding behind curtains of deniability, but absolutely is the puppeteer. One could be forgiven for calling the whole mess insanity. A number of years ago, a maritime journalist and environmentalist, Silver Donald Cameron, made a beautiful proposal that was to require governments of all stripes to run everything through a figurative filter when coming up with new policies. A filter that would vet the impact of economics, the environment, and social justice, all viewed through an ethical lens. So often a policy initiative comes from a government bureaucrat or whoever that focuses just on economic metrics without other factors. Things like environmental degradation from oil pipeline construction would never be addressed, nor would the social implications of maybe steamrolling indigenous land rights, even though it looked like a good economic thing to build a pipeline. You get the drift. Now, if the principle was applied to this Wilmot situation, the land grab would not pass the sniff test on any of those parameters. It makes no economic sense to steal prime food land for an unknown a future industrial purpose. There's no urgency like there might be during a war. There's nobody that's been identified as an interested buyer. There would be a permanent destruction of the productive farm units that currently exist. And furthermore, a big corporate entity from another country that is being sought somehow would move the vast majority of its profits offshore to wherever the tax base was or tax rate was lower. Farmers spend the great percentage of their money within 100 miles of the farm. In this circumstance, the environment would lose big time. Again, prime food land's a precious resource, not to be squandered. And as Jen mentioned in the video, it took thousands of years for that soil profile to develop. And in a matter of months, it could all be gone forever. The water beneath the land base is also of great concern. It would be impossible not to have a negative impact should this go down Ford's way. The social justice part is particularly galling. The farmers at the center of this have endured more stress than any human should, especially from one's own government that purports to protect its citizens. Likewise, for the supporters of those farmers here. I've seen the strain in your eyes, heard the anguish in voices, and I stand here in admiration for all of you who have the courage to tell Doug Ford and the region that no means no. I don't suppose there's a single member of provincial government that would voluntarily give up their home, their property, their career, their life savings, their lifelong dreams, and the potential dreams of their children for the sake of an unknown foreign corporation. So why ask it of the farmers? As for the lens of ethics, the whole process has been a disaster, from the creation of a devious plan, sending in the high-pressure real estate bagmen, the NDAs, the corn crop destruction, the finger-pointing between different levels of government, on and on it goes. When trust in authorities has been so eroded, it leads to more questions. Was the whole thing brought on as payback to developers who lost out on the Greenbelt lottery? Was the chaos a race for dollars when the federal government was throwing money at EVs and housing plans that were very aggressive? Was the municipal government counting on a handsome profit for its role in the land grab? And when it didn't go as planned, the dramatic tax hike was tabled. I don't know the answers, but there's a bad smell in the air. It's definitely time for complete withdrawal of this attempted takeover. Mr. Ford is unlikely to have any luck in Washington changing Trump's mind on tariffs. But he could do something worthwhile at home, like pulling the plug on the land grab. Any future needs for industrial land should follow proper planning rules and be done with transparency and oversight. The well-known anthropologist Margaret Mead was once asked by a student, "What do you think the first sign of civilization was?" And this young student thought it might be a better design of fish hook or maybe a clay pot that would allow cooking meat on the fire. But no, Margaret said, it was a femur, a leg bone that had been broken and then healed. In those ancient times, a broken leg was a pretty sure death sentence. You couldn't run to catch your dinner. You couldn't run away from something that wanted you for dinner. You couldn't walk down to the river for water. Someone had obviously cared enough to stabilize that injury and then stayed with the person through a lengthy recovery period. It was care that was seen as the civilization's genesis. Today, we need leaders who truly care about the people and the land, not vain rulers who drool over the ill-gotten spoils of force. That would be a welcome mark of civilization. To any members of municipal or provincial government in attendance, I don't suppose there are any, but I'd ask you to reflect on the words of Charlie Chaplin, who said, "You should always tell the truth, then you don't have to remember what you said." To the farmers and supporters here tonight, stand your ground. Thank you.
I'm not sure if John's passion came through or not. There's just one line, or one thing I'd like to say before we get to I think we're getting into pretty much the final segment of our evening. Have you got lots of info so far tonight? Enjoyed it? One thing I just want to say about the group, both with our Wilmot Civic Action Network and the Fight for Farmland, that these people and all their supporters and all of their allies, they've really inspired a lot of people within the region. There's no doubt about that. Everybody is just, wow, look at what these guys are doing. But they know the tenacity that's needed to persevere in a world of capitalists that see the farmer and all the food producers in this township and far beyond, they see them as an obstacle instead of the keystone to their only survival. And that's what we got to think about. They just want to get rid of our food. And more, it's just becoming apparent that we have to become more self-sufficient. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn again over to Mr. Balkwill, and with our final part of the evening. Michael?
Thanks, John. There are 3 calls to action we're going to talk about. And there are 3 things we're going to ask you to do. Did you all get one of these cards on the way in? So I'm going to talk about it briefly, and if you didn't get one, you can get one. And there's enough that you can take some home and give to your friends, which I'm going to talk about. In preparation for talking about the calls to action, though, I'd like you to think about for a moment your favorite sport where there's a contest between one side and the other. Whatever your favorite sport might be. It could be hockey, it could be soccer, it could be chess, it could be tennis, it could be whatever. So imagine that. And there's a contest between this side and that side, and in order to win, one has to, trying to pick the right word here, you know, why am I short of words? It has to somehow have more strength, more power, more strategy than the other side, right? And I'm connecting with so many things that John just said, and the one that's coming to me right now is that the other side in this contest has a lot of power. The other side that wants to expropriate this land has institutional power, it has legal power, it has financial power. You're up against some big corporations. They have a lot of power. And the only way that we win is by not being a spectator to the contest, but by coming out of the seats and on the field on our team, on your team. Now, there's been terrific leadership in this community for several months, both with the Fight for Farmland group and now with the Wilmot Civic Action group. There's 8 or 10 people who are meeting all the time. There's a group of 30 or 40 that have been meeting every couple of weeks. And they need you to come down. I'm not saying you're just watching, but if you aren't just watching, they're asking you to come down and be on the field with them, because you can only win, we can only win when we're all on the field together with our team, because they have money and institutional power, but you have knowledge and you have information and you have truth and justice on your side. Am I right? Are you familiar, a couple of years ago, 4 years ago in fact, was a glass company wanted to build a glass factory up in Stratford. Did you hear about that? It was going to be a done deal. I worked with the people in Stratford, the Get Concerned Stratford group, and we stopped that factory. We stopped what was going to be a done deal. There was an NDA. It's very similar to what was going on here, and we stopped it. And the secret, here was the secret, the not so secret to stopping it. The councillors, the mayor and the councillors, came to learn from the people in Stratford that if they went ahead with this, there would be consequences. There would be consequences for their reputation. There'd be consequences for their legacy. There'd be consequences for their ability to get reelected. And they changed their mind. I'm literally from out of town. I live in Toronto. I've been watching this for 6 months. You're doing extraordinary things. You've held these people at bay for 6 months. You've got terrific media. There's many, many things you're doing well. There's the next part of the campaign is what we're going to talk about now. Your mayor and council, I'm told by your leadership, that if they say they're not a willing host, if they pass a resolution saying they're not a willing host, that could undo the whole deal. That's what happened in Stratford. The council said, we don't want to do this anymore. And a deal that was in very similar ways, it had a minister's zoning order to protect it, it had funding from the provincial government, and the council went, we don't want to do this anymore. Your council, if it passes a resolution saying it's not a willing host, will crack the foundation of this deal. The first call to action I'm going to talk with you about is on this card. It's very important for you to talk to the mayor and the council in all kinds of ways, and I'm going to briefly talk about those kinds of ways. You'll see on the back of the card is their contact information. On the front of the card is a postcard is a QR code, and if you go there, it'll give you very specific advice on how to contact your councillor and the kinds of things to say. And if you don't mind me repeating myself, it's really important for you to say to them what the consequence is if they make this decision. If you say to them it's a bad thing and you don't want it, that's very, very good. But the second part of it is for you to say to them, there'll be a consequence. And you can write them a letter, you can make a delegation, you can make a phone call, maybe you'll see them in the grocery store, maybe you'll see them at the hockey rink, maybe you'll see them in church. Maybe you'll be at somebody's wedding or somebody's funeral. And at all those places, it's important for you to go up to them and say, I don't want you to be a willing host. I want you to support a motion to not be a willing host. And if you do that, you'll be rewarded. And if not, there'll be a consequence. How many people think they could have a conversation or a phone call or write an email or write a letter like that? You've done it already. So, and I hear the frustration of, Have I done it already? I've done it already. I hear the frustration, and because sometimes, and this is my experience, you have to hit the rock 1,000 times before it cracks. They are cracking. They are cracking. I'll tell you one more thing. They had an NDA up in Stratford. Because of the persistent personal engagement of people in the community with the councillors, they started to leak. That's the beginning of the cracking. So it's very important you do those things. We've given you the information to do that. How many people are going to do that? There's some people who don't have their hands up. And I don't know if it's because you don't feel like stretching or there's something you need to know from us to help you do that. And if you're not sure you want to do that and you need some help or some support or some convincing, contact us. There's email on here, etc. So that's thing number one. Okay? We're good for that call to action? Here's thing number two. There's a provincial election happening. You've heard about that. We're in a sanctuary. We're not talking politics. But there are candidates in the room, and they're going to be downstairs. They're going to go downstairs after this meeting so that you can talk to them, so you can ask them things, and most importantly, so you can tell them things. And I just want to do a shout out for who's in the room so you'll know, and apologies if I don't get people's names right. Judy Szymanski from the NDP is here. Joe Gowing from the Liberal Party is here. Jim Karahalios from the New Blue Party is here, or he was here. He was here. He's maybe wandered to the back somewhere. Mike Harris Jr. was invited. He's not here. And Braden Wagonar from the Green Party was invited, and I don't think he's here. But they'll be available downstairs so you can talk to them, and you probably can imagine what you can and should do during the provincial election. I won't say more about that. Jeff? Right there. Which part? And I was just identifying the candidates from this riding. Do you want to do a shout out? Tim Luis is here, your federal MP. He's back here. Here's the third call to action. We've been talking about it. There's been a couple of spoiler alerts. We're going to talk about donations. You received this card on the way in. Did you get one of these cards? It's called a pledge card. And it's conveniently designed so that you can write on both pages, tear it in half, and take a part home, leave a part here, and take a piece home to remind yourself. And if you need a pair of scissors, we have a pair of scissors at the back to facilitate this. Now, I'm going to describe a bit why we're raising money, and we're actually going to do some fundraising here, and I'm going to tell you about how we're going to do that. Okay? So, as the leadership group is raising money really for the first time, and they want to be able to plan with confidence. So knowing how much they have will help them plan with confidence. And there's been much conversation tonight about lawyers, maybe hiring other experts, costs money, and the amount of money that you start to pledge tonight will help them plan with confidence. They think they're going to need to raise about $50,000 to be able to hire the lawyers and the experts and make the case they need to make to stop the expropriation that goes along with all the work you're going to do in the community. That's what they think they're going to need. And I'm going to be talking with you tonight about whether we can pledge, whether we together can make pledges for the first $20,000. Now, a pledge means you say that is a pledge of your contribution. It can be a donation you make tonight. It can be a donation you make in installments. It could be a donation you make later. It could be a donation you make on a monthly basis. How you fulfill your pledge is up to you. Knowing what support they have from the community helps them plan with confidence. So far, so good? On the pledge card is a QR code. that takes you directly to the small change fund place where you can make a donation online, and you will receive a tax receipt for that donation. My colleague Susan Lloyd-Swales at the back, we've conveniently placed them there so you can't leave the building without going past them. And you can drop your pledge card off, but also Susan has one of those very clever little square devices so that you can make your donation by credit or debit on the way out. You can also write a check, and there's instructions on here about how to write a check. So far, so good? Those are the details. Here comes what I hope you'll find to be the fun part. Is in a moment, I'm going to ask people to pledge particular amounts. I'm going to start with a certain number and say, who would make a pledge of this amount? And every contribution helps. And people have different abilities to contribute. We want to respect that. And you may be sitting there saying, well, I don't know if I want to say out loud how much money I want to pledge. Maybe it doesn't feel right, or you're a modest person. And if you want to be anonymous, that's okay. But I also want to say to you that it's a sign of commitment to each other. It's a sign of solidarity. It says something to each other that I'm in. Are you in? Are we in this together? And so I've done this many times in many communities, and frankly, people enjoy it, and they appreciate it. In that context, though, there are some people who will want to be modest and be anonymous, and that's okay too. And every donation is equal in its value in terms of who gives it. I'm almost at the part where I ask for the money. It's coming in just a minute. You have a question? 90%. 10% is for the administration, small change, because we do all the bookkeeping for the organization, et cetera. I appreciate your question. The last thing I want to say is, and this connects for me in hearing John, is you all have different reasons to care. And I invite you for a moment to reflect on your reason why you care. I've heard many reasons. It could be because the farmers who are under threat are your neighbors. It could be because it's about the nature and quality of who your community is. It can be because farmland is precious. It can be because sovereignty is important. It can be because this is blatantly unjust. And you know, sometimes we just have to stand up to the bastards. That's a Latin term. So with all of that in mind, and with the idea of seeing how close we can get to $20,000 in pledges tonight, I'm wondering who's willing to make a pledge of $2,500. Hands up if you're willing to make a pledge of $2,500. By the way, you might have to think about this for a minute. You might need to turn to somebody who you're with. You might want to turn to somebody who you don't know and say, what do you think? And so I'm going to just do this for a minute while you think about whether you'd like to, there's somebody who'd like to pledge $2,500. That's a little more than 10% on the way to our $20,000 goal, which will give the confidence that your leadership needs. Is there anybody, maybe even thinking anonymously, is anybody who'll pledge $2,500? Pardon me? I'm going to get there. I'm starting at $2,500. Don't be rushing me. Don't be rushing me. Anybody pledge $2,500? Going once? Right there. Stephen? Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Let's appreciate Stephen.
So I'm already a bad Mennonite because you're supposed to give without expecting any of that, Mike. But I wanted to, it's worth $2,500 for me to get up here and tell the point about this 90%. Some portion of these donations do go to the small change funds and the administration thereof, but the return on investment that we've got in Mike and his team helping us, we would never have done the polling. We would never have done meetings like this. The amount of time that this guy has given to us and guidance that he's given to us, the Wilmot Civic Action Network and the Fight for Farmland, is worth far more than 10% of that. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Believe it or not, that was not planned. Is there anybody else who'd like to pledge $2,500 and make a speech at the front of the room? Okay, and somebody's going to be my helper. John, you be my helper because I'm going to need a little help with it. You can stay there to do your helping, but I'm going to need a little help with the math. Who would like to pledge $2,000? $2,500 plus $2,000 gets us on the road to our goal. Anybody want to pledge $2,000? Be careful, this is like an auction, you know, you go like this, you scratch your head. I start to think maybe. Okay, how about $1,500? It's somebody who'd pledge $1,500. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, you're looking at each other. How about $1,000? $1,000? Right there. Is that Jen Pennick? Thank you, Jen. Thanks, let's thank Jen. We're at $3,500. Anybody want to join the $1,000 club with Jen? Right there. What's your name? Pardon me? It doesn't matter. Let's please thank It Doesn't Matter for $1,000. That gets us at $4,500. Another $1,000. Will somebody else pledge $1,000? How about $500? John, $500. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Don, thank you, Don. Remember, your pledges can be fulfilled in installments. They can be later. If you received a check from Doug Ford for $200, you may be thinking to yourself, if there were a couple of those in your household and you haven't decided what to do with them, and you can afford to invest it in the campaign to stop Doug Ford, that would be a $400 donation. Who would pledge $400? Back there. Thank you. Doug Bucks. And what's your name? Doesn't matter. Another vote for Doesn't Matter. Thank you. Another $400 pledge? Anybody else pledge $400? $250. Who'll pledge $250? What's your name? Allison and Nancy. Thank you, Allison and Nancy. And Jan. Thank you, Jan. Another $250. That would bring us to $1,000. Yes, your name? Thank you, Rob. What are we at, John? $6,900. Okay, what about another $200? Back there. Back there. Two people whose names what are your names? And? Thank you. That's 200 and 200. Thank you. 200, yes. And you're? Lydia. Thank you, Lydia. 200 for Ann. Thank you, Ann. Deb and Krista and John Thompson. My high school pal. And Rory, $200. Are there any additional people in the $200 club? What are we at, John? $8,400, okay. Yes. $200, is that Andy? Andy, $200 for Andy, that puts us at $8,600. Gord, $200, thank you, that's $8,800. The Doug Ford $200 is popular. Anybody else want to take Doug Ford's $200 and put it up his budget? We're at $8,800. $200 gets us to $9,000. What a good number that would feel like if we got to $900 with another $9,000 with another $200 pledge. That would be great. It could also happen with two $100 pledges. Who'll pledge $100? Back there at the back, what's your name? Frank. Thank you, Frank. Anybody else for $100? because that'll bring us to 9,000. We want to get to 9,000, don't we? We don't want to stay. Yes, right here. What's your name? Don? Thank you, Don. Kristen, we're $9,100. I think we can get to 10,000. We just need a little, and like, how about if I say at 10,000, I'll stop? You know, and that'll maybe motivate you. So anybody else want to pledge $100? $50. Who'll pledge $50? Right there. Thank you. What's your name? Lou. Thank you, Lou. John, somebody gave me a $50 check at the beginning of the meeting, so count that, so add that $50. No, we added yours, and then somebody else gave me 50. I forgot until just now. So we're at 9,100, John? 9,200. $50? I bet you there's somebody in the room who'd like to pledge $800 and just put us out of our misery. I think there's somebody who wants to do that. I'm just trying to think who it might be. Would anybody else like to make a pledge of any amount? Going once? Going twice? You'll top up the 800? Thank you very much. We're at $10,000. Thank you for the confidence you're showing in your leadership and the importance of this cause. This allows your leadership to go forward. There will be some of you, I'm sure, are going to make anonymous pledges, and we appreciate that. And there'll be follow-ups in emails, etc., and the leadership will let you know what you can do with that money, and either fill the pledge card in and take one home so you remember it, or leave it at the front with them, so with Susan and Joan, so they can follow up with you, or drop off a check, or use this Square device. John Jordan.
And thank you all. That's very kind, very generous, and we very much appreciate it. And it gets us underway in getting done what we need to get done, well, get started to get this thing done and over with, that's for sure. So just to kind of remind you again, if you are willing to lend a hand, because many hands make light work, I'll tell you, there's a lot of stuff that goes on within this group. Email us, let us know. You can go on our website, wilmotcan.com. Email us at info@wilmotcan.com. And if you would like to join our group, and then we can put you on the mailing list. Is Joan still here? Joan at the back, Joan Fox. Oh man. Joan, come out. Yes, wave to everybody. Without Joan, we'd be lost. She is the glue that keeps everyone together, I'll tell you. And yes, if you can come out and help, that'd be great. And get your friends, get your family. Let's go onto our website too. There's the letter writing guide on there, right, Mike? Yep, Mike. And Mike is very much a volunteer, looks after our web and our social media, and the guy's a brilliant, brilliant guy when it comes to that. And everybody can adjourn downstairs afterwards. Jody's going to be there, Joe's going to be there, and I think that's all we've got, right? Well, Jeff's here. He's an out-of-towner, but that doesn't matter. He's within the region. He's a good guy. Anyway, thank you, and safe drive home, and we look forward to seeing you again. Oh, sorry. Oh, song. Mr. Steve Todd is gonna. Sorry, I forgot all about that. I think he's going to give us. It's an original. One of the originals for the farm.
I wrote the Thanks Wilmot Farmers. That's what.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Steve Todd.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. The one comment I got from this song was how many different things are actually grown, like how many different crops and livestock that actually happens in Wilmot, how vibrant the community is. So I thought that was pretty neat. I think this is the first time I've ever played this live. So anyway. On Wilmot farmland, under the sun, working hard until the day is done. With
calloused hands, sore backs and knees, they're feeding us meat, veggies, and cheese. From the dirt, we'll make it grow, through the storms and through the snow. Thank the Schneiders for their milk, Vanberheiks for their cheese, the Wegglers for their cabbage, and the Benders for the sheep. Thanks, Wilmot farmers, for all that you do, for every seed that was planted, every crop that you grew, working hard to feed the families, and reaching the Waterloo. From your fields to our tables, Wilmot thanks you. Working before it's light, until the stars fill up the night. Lamb or chicken, pork or beef, it's all right here in Wilmot. Herb Schneiders here on Bleens Road, their harvest is coming load by load. You know that they're on their way. Here's what you should say. Thank Crespin's for the pork, Hurley's for their corn, Fenning's honey, Wegler's garlic, Schneiders for the beef. Thank Wilmot farmers for all that you do, every seed that was planted, every crop that you grew, eggs or apples, oat or ale, barley and soybeans too. From your fields to our tables, Wilmot thanks you. Labels, beef, Fennings, carrots, Schneider and Pender turkeys, Lansing Riders, chicken, and Rose maple syrup. Thanks, Wilmot farmers, for all that you do, for every seed that was planted, every crop that you grew, working hard for the families in the region of Waterloo. From your fields to our tables, Wilmot thanks you. From your fields to our tables, Wilmot thanks you. All right, thanks a lot. Thank you. It's amazing how much stuff is actually grown here, so we've definitely got to protect it.